7 days. Exactly 7 days before our silver anniversary, I decided to surprise my wife Melissa by digitizing the old VHS tapes from our wedding. 25 years they've been sitting in a dusty box on the top shelf of our garage in Seattle. I hooked up the ancient VCR to my computer and put on professional headphones to clean up the audio. Grainy, sun-bleached footage started rolling across the screen. Us young, happy, clueless. Our parents, our friends. I even smiled. And then, right as the wedding host started singing some ridiculous joke song, I heard a whisper, two voices, Melissa's and Evan's, my best friend, my best man. I rewound, raised the volume, removed the background hiss, hit play again. Melissa's voice, soft, intimate. You know this is our goodbye night. A pause. Then Evan, smug and confident. Best goodbye night I've ever had. The wedding image froze on my screen, Melissa in her white dress smiling at me, while I stared at her ghost, and my world cracked cleanly into before and after. My ears buzzed with white noise. My chest felt like someone shoved burning ice inside it. They were talking about their night, the night before my wedding. I sat in the quiet of our suburban Seattle home, the air heavy with dust from old tapes and the smell of cold coffee. The computer hummed softly. I played the recording again, and again. The words carved themselves into my skull like acid. Goodbye night. The best. 25 years of marriage. 2 kids already grown. I built this life brick by brick, and the foundation had been poured in filth. I remembered that day, Evan clapping me on the shoulder with that fake smile. Take good care of her, Mike. Meanwhile, he was walking out of her bed. My breath caught. Hatred became physical. All my spreadsheets, order, logic, my neat structure life just disintegrated into dust. All that remained was cold calculation. They were going to pay. For every year lived in a lie. For every moment I raised children in a house built on betrayal. The next morning Melissa walked into the kitchen, fresh and smiling, kissed me on the cheek. Her perfume, once familiar and comforting, now turned my stomach. Good morning, honey. You're up early. I looked at her and saw the girl from the tape, the girl whispering to my best man. Just replaying the wedding, I said evenly. She smiled even wider. How sweet. Planning a surprise? Oh, yeah, a surprise. I watched her reaction when I said Evan's name. It lasted less than a second, a flicker in her eyes. But I saw it. She looked away toward the gray November rain outside the window. I barely remember anything. It was so long ago, she lied effortlessly, like it was breathing. How many lies? How many nights? I would never know. 6 days left. I got in my car and drove, anywhere away from her eyes. My grip on the steering wheel was so tight my knuckles turned white. My insides boiled. I wanted to scream, break something, destroy everything. But instead, cold clarity settled in. Emotions are weakness. I needed a plan, a strategy. I wasn't just going to get revenge. I was going to take everything from them. Their comfort, their pride, their facade of a clean life. First on my list, Evan. He worked for a major real estate development firm in a high-rise in downtown Seattle. I parked in the underground garage, mask on my face. His shiny black BMW stood in its reserved space, a symbol of his success, a success partly built on my humiliation. I didn't slash his tires. That was petty. Instead, I crouched and attached a small GPS tracker under his bumper. Now I'd know every step he took. As I stood up, I saw him, walking toward his car, talking on the phone. He didn't recognize me with the mask. I brushed intentionally against his shoulder. "Watch where you're going," he snapped. I didn't respond, just smirked under the mask. "You will watch." Very carefully. Soon, that evening I called him. "Evan, it's Mike. Listen, we should meet. I've got an idea for Melissa's anniversary gift." We met at a dim little bar on Capitol Hill. He was already there with a beer, smiling like a man who slept fine at night. "So what did you come up with?" I sat down across from him, looked him dead in the eyes. I was going through old archives, digitizing our wedding tapes. His smile froze. His hand, holding the beer, trembled, and the sound quality nowadays is incredible. You can hear every whisper. He turned pale. I saw fear, the exact fear I wanted. He understood. He didn't know what I knew, or how much, and that uncertainty was going to eat him alive. I went home late. Melissa was asleep. I checked on our kids, our son in college, our daughter in her final year of high school. Their peaceful faces, they were the only real thing I had left. I opened my laptop. The audio file was still on the screen. Pain didn't fade, but beside it now was cold, surgical rage. A plan was forming, a multi-step operation, something methodical, precise. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, a single photo, my daughter, walking home from school, taken from a distance, and one short message. "Be careful, Mike." 5 days left. Fear crawled up my spine, but it mixed with something hotter, darker. This was no longer about infidelity. This was war. Evan wanted to play dirty. Thought I'd be scared. He had no idea who I had become. I deleted the message. Deleted the photo. No panic. No trace. I stepped outside. Rain hung in the air like mist, turning the streetlights into smudged yellow halos. My phone buzzed again. Notification from the GPS tracker. Evan's BMW was moving, but not toward home. I followed at a distance, lights off whenever possible. The tracker led me south, into an industrial zone filled with storage units and abandoned warehouses. His car pulled into an old, run-down roadside motel with a flickering neon sign. "Relax in." I parked under a dying oak tree and waited. A memory hit me. Melissa once said she'd visited a friend in this area years ago. I hadn't thought anything of it. I should have. Every lie now weighed tons. An hour later, Evan came out alone and drove away. Back home, I waited until Melissa fell asleep. Her steady breathing sounded fake to me now. I opened her laptop. Password was our son's birthday. How poetic. 10 minutes of digging into her email. Nothing. Too clean. Too perfect. But I'm an accountant. I know how to find what's hidden. Her bank history showed weekly transfers, small identical amounts, to a shell company. Payment for what? I replayed the wedding audio again. Goodbye night. Those words weren't a confession. They were the first tile in a long, ugly domino chain. The next day we were in Costco, pushing a full shopping cart through crowd. Smell of fresh bread, detergent, people arguing over rotisserie chickens. Perfect place for an unpleasant conversation. "You know," I said casually, "I had to stop by the South Side yesterday for work." She looked at me calmly. "Okay." Saw this old motel down there. Relax in. Real dump. Made me think of that friend you said lives in that area. Her hand froze mid-reach. "Oh, right," she said lightly. "Samantha rents a place there. Haven't seen her in ages." Lie. So smooth it almost shined. Then I saw it. her phone screen lighting up in her hand. Notification. Sender, a single letter. E. Message, he knows. 4 days left. The walls were closing in. I went to my office and shut the door. Everything narrowed to the glow of the screen. He knows. Evan must have warned her after our bar meeting. They were working together. They were scared. Good. That was good. Fear makes people sloppy. I opened a file on Horizon Services, LLC again. If this was their pipeline for dirty money, there had to be more threads to pull. I dug deeper, switched on every professional skill I had, every contact, every favor anyone still owed me. A couple of hours later, I had a preliminary report on my screen. The company was a ghost contractor, fake construction deals, bogus invoices, and the trail led straight into the development firm where Evan worked. He was laundering money through the shell. And Melissa, my loyal, loving partner of 25 years, had been his accomplice all along. Maybe just a courier, maybe something much bigger. Who exactly was she in all of this? That night, I drove downtown to his office tower. Sleeping wasn't an option anyway. I had a plan, reckless, borderline insane, but it was the only one that made sense. I knew the building. My firm had done an audit there a year earlier. I knew the way security rotated. I knew how access control worked. I knew the weak spots. I climbed the service stairs to the 42nd floor. The hallway was dark, smelling of expensive cologne and dust. The only sound was the low hum of the ventilation system. His office door was locked. That wasn't a problem. A few minutes with a basic lockpick set, and I was inside. His desk was perfectly clean, but I knew where to look. Behind a framed abstract painting on the wall, my fingers found a small safe. I'd already guessed the code earlier that day. My daughter's birthday. Funny. Inside were folders, double books, offshore accounts, flowcharts of transactions. Everything. It was a jackpot. I photographed every page, every chart. This wasn't just leverage. It was a loaded weapon. That's when I heard it. A door closing somewhere in the hallway. I froze, documents in hand. The kind of paperwork that could bury Evan for years. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Getting closer. I slipped behind a large ficus plant in the corner, just as the office door opened. It wasn't Evan. A man I'd never seen before stepped inside. Wide shoulders, close-cropped hair, tailored suit. Calm, efficient eyes. He scanned the room, walked to the desk, and dialed a number on his phone. Yeah, I'm here. The safe is open. He's in the building. What do you want me to do? He listened. His face didn't change. Then he nodded. Got it? I'll take care of it. He put the phone away and pulled a handgun with a suppressor from his jacket. My world flipped again. This wasn't just blackmail with photos anymore. This was survival. He walked deeper into the room, peering into the shadows. That's when I understood. Melissa wasn't just an accomplice. She was part of the order. And I was the target. 3 days. 3 days until an anniversary that was never going to happen. The pistol with the silencer in his hand looked like a period at the end of my life. Seconds stretched. Outside, 42 floors below, the city lights glowed, distant, uncaring. The air smelled of electronics and somebody's designer fragrance. My accountant's brain, trained to juggle variables, scrambled for options. I had no weapon, no strength, but I had rage, and a heavy marble paperweight on the edge of the desk. When he stepped in my direction, I jumped, not at him, but toward the desk. My hand closed around the paperweight, like it had been waiting for me. The blow landed at his temple with a dull, sick thud. He staggered, squeezing the trigger on instinct. The shot was muffled, but the burning impact tore through my shoulder. Pain flared hot, sharp, immediate. I didn't scream. I grabbed a chair and hurled it at the floor-to-ceiling window. Glass exploded outward with a deafening crash, and freezing night air slammed into the office. I didn't stop to think. I climbed out onto the narrow maintenance ledge, swung over the rail, and started down the external fire escape. Every step set my shoulder on fire. Below me stretched the city that apparently wanted me dead. Blood soaked through my shirt. Somewhere between the tower and the highway, I lost track of time. I drove on autopilot, hands numb on the wheel, adrenaline smothering the pain. I couldn't go home. Home was a trap, their ground. I couldn't go to friends. How many of them were also his friends? I finally pulled over at a grimy 24-hour diner off the freeway. Inside it smelled like burnt oil and cheap coffee. I slid into a sticky booth in the corner and ordered an espresso. The burnt bitterness snapped my thoughts into place. They hadn't just tried to ruin me. They hadn't just wanted a divorce or my money. They'd tried to erase me, efficiently, like writing off a bad debt. I remembered a night a year ago. I had the flu, fever over 102. Melissa sat beside me, changing cold compresses, spooning broth into my mouth. You're my only one, Mike. I don't know what I'd do without you. Her voice had sounded so sincere, so perfectly fake. That whisper on the tape, the one I'd written off as some long-ago fling, had actually been the prologue to my death sentence. Why? Wasn't the money they were washing enough? What else did they want? Hiding would be losing. They thought I was a wounded animal crawling into a hole to die. They were wrong. The next morning, I stood outside the upscale fitness club where Evan worked on his body and his ego every day. I waited near the locker room exit. He came out fresh, pumped, full of himself. When he saw me, he flinched. I must have looked like hell. Stubble, dark circles under my eyes, shirt hiding a bloody bandage. But what shook him wasn't my face. It was my eyes. Not fear, not begging, hatred. The safe's empty, I said quietly. His expression turned to stone. What do you want? Justice, I replied and walked away, leaving him standing in the echoing hallway. Now he knew I was alive. Now he knew I had his secrets. And now every sound behind him would make him turn. I watched from the parking lot as he fumbled for his phone and dialed someone. 2 days. I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. The room smelled like damp carpet and resignation. On the bed, I laid out the photos of the documents from Evan's safe. Schemes, accounts, names. This wasn't just embezzlement. It was a network. Evan was just one cog. What was Melissa? Not a victim. Not a side piece. A puppeteer. I stared at the numbers until they blurred, and behind them I saw something else. People. Dangerous people. The kind who don't forgive mistakes. And definitely don't forgive anyone who knows too much. The photo of my daughter they'd sent me took on a new, sharper meaning. She wasn't just leverage. She was collateral. Rage cooled into something razor sharp. I needed a weapon. Not for revenge, for balance, for insurance. I thought of Eddie Cross. We'd served together in the Army, back when we were young and thought the world made sense. After the military, his life spun in a very different direction. Guns, favors, things done off the books. The last time I'd seen him was about 10 years ago, when he helped me solve a problem I couldn't put into an email. I dug through old contacts until I found a way to reach him. We met in an old industrial lot full of garages on the outskirts of the city. The air smelled of gasoline and coal metal. Eddie had aged, thinned out, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. He listened without interrupting. No judgment. No unnecessary questions. "What do you need it for?" he finally asked, handed me something heavy wrapped in an oily rag. "To settle debts," I said. "This thing changes people, Mike. There's no going back once you use it." I took the bundle. The cold metal burned my fingers. I don't have a way back anyway. Now I had leverage. And a gun. From a burner phone, I sent Evan one photo, a payment slip with a very recognizable name in certain circles, and one short message. "Tomorrow, midnight, the unfinished Riverside Heights complex. You come alone." I knew he'd show. Fear for his own life would be stronger than fear of the people above him. I waited on the top floor of the bare concrete skeleton. Wind howled through the empty openings where windows would someday be. Far below, the river glowed faintly under 6 streetlights. Perfect place to end one story and start another. In the distance, headlights cut through the dark. His BMW. He came alone, just like I'd expected. Cowardice was a defining trait. He climbed the stairs, constantly looking over his shoulder, flashlight beam jumping over rebar and piles of construction trash. When he finally saw me, he stopped dead. "What do you want, Mike?" "Take the money. Take all of it." "I want to know who he is," I said. The gun in my hand gave my voice extra weight. "Who?" "The man who was in your office last night. The one who sent me my daughter's photo. The one you and Melissa run errands for." Evan stayed silent, so I stepped forward and hit him. He dropped to the concrete, clutching his face, whimpering like a beaten dog. And then he started talking. He told me everything about the scheme that had been running almost 10 years, about how Melissa wasn't just his mistress. She was the brain, about how the money was for her new life, far away, with their boss, a man whose name made even someone like Evan shake. That's when his phone started ringing in his pocket. I yanked it out of his hands. Unknown number. I answered and held it to my ear. A cold male voice spoke. "Well, is he dead?" I said nothing. "Evan, don't go quiet on me. Is the accountant dead?" One day, the voice was calm, detached, like a surgeon discussing a routine procedure. "The accountant is dead." On the floor, Evan stopped whimpering and stared at me in pure animal terror. I stayed silent. Options flew through my head. If I said yes, they'd start looking for a body. If I said no, they'd send someone else. Someone better than the first guy. I shoved the phone against Evan's mouth. "Tell him it's done. Tell him the body's in the river." He shook his head violently. I pressed the barrel to his temple. He trembled and croaked into the phone. "Yeah, it's done. He's in the river." There was a pause. Then the same cold voice. "I'll see you at the office with the report." The line went dead. I tossed the phone aside. It hit the concrete with a hollow clatter. Evan stared at me, waiting for his sentence. But I wasn't going to kill him. Not yet. "I own you now, Evan." "Got it." He nodded, shaking all over. "You're going to walk into that office. Tell him I tried to run, you fired, and I fell into the water. Act shocked. And then you're going to do everything I tell you." I hit him once more, not hard, but enough to leave a mark. For realism. Then I left, and drove back to the industrial lot where Eddie was waiting. The air in the garage smelled like metal, motor oil, and something else. Something older soaked into the walls. danger that had lived here long before we arrived. Eddie silently cleaned the wound in my shoulder. The pain was dull, throbbing, thick. "This isn't just some drama over a woman anymore, Mike," he muttered, tightening the bandage. "I know. They tried to kill me. They won't stop." He nodded. I sat on an old ammo crate, and my past life felt like a half-forgotten dream. Mike Donovan, CPA, husband, father. That man no longer existed. What remained was a wounded man with a gun and a folder of incriminating evidence. Hunted by wolves. I thought of Melissa. For 25 years, she'd looked at me with love. And all that time, she'd been running a parallel life. Her real life. A life where I was nothing but a resource. A disposable asset. Who was she now? Who had she become while I balanced spreadsheets and checked whether the kids had finished their homework? Morning would be the most dangerous step. Getting the kids out. I called my son. "Dad, where are you?" "Mom's freaking out. She says you disappeared." "Listen carefully, son. No questions. Take your sister. Grab only your documents and your laptops. In 1 hour, meet me at the coffee shop near the station. And don't tell anyone, especially your mother." There was confusion in his voice, but he said, Okay, Dad." I sat at a table in the corner where I could see the entire cafe. Every minute felt like torture. Then they walked in, looking around nervously. My kids, so grown up, yet so helpless in a game they didn't even know they were part of. Fear flickered in their eyes. I hugged them both. My daughter smelled like her favorite perfume. My son smelled like anxiety. "What's going on, Dad?" she whispered. "I'll explain later. Here, money, train tickets. You're going to your aunt in Portland. Tell her I sent you for a last-minute break. Turn off your phones, remove the SIM cards, and buy new ones when you get there." They stared at me, silent, scared. Breaking their normal world felt like ripping out my own ribs. But saving them mattered more than saving myself. I spent the rest of the day in Eddie's garage. Laptop open. Secure connection. All the documents I collected from Evan's safe. I was an accountant all my life. Now I was using numbers as weapons. I created several anonymous email accounts and started sending out packets. Not to the police, not to the FBI. No, I sent the juiciest pieces of evidence to their boss's business rivals, the security department of the bank they use for laundering, an investigative online outlet known for exposing financial crimes. I didn't ask for anything. I didn't negotiate. I just released the facts. Transactions, account numbers, offshore routes, key dates. Then I threw that burning match into their anthill. Let them scramble. Let them panic. They wouldn't have time to come after me. Not while fighting a fire that could burn them all, including Melissa. Tomorrow was our anniversary. 25 years. Silver milestone. Perfect day for the final act. I forced Evan to call Melissa. Tell her the accountant is dead. Tell her the boss wants to meet her personally, to give her her share. Tonight, same motel, same room. Evan stuttered through the lines, trembling. I listened as Melissa answered. Her voice was calm, almost cheerful. She agreed instantly. She bought it. The trap was ready. She would come for her payout, her freedom. Instead, she would find me, her not-so-dead husband. I remembered the whisper on the wedding tape. Goodbye night. How symbolic. Tonight would be her real goodbye night. Before heading to the motel, I drove to our house. I had to. I stood across the street under the shadows of the trees, watching the windows glowing warmly. She was inside. Packing maybe. preparing to step into her future. What did she feel? Relief? Excitement? I stared at the house where I had lived every day of my life and felt nothing. No pain, no nostalgia. Only cold stillness and a sharp determination to end the story properly. I pulled a small VHS tape from my pocket. Our wedding tape. The last relic of my old life. And the last thing she would ever see. I was inside the motel room an hour early. The place smelled of stale sheets and cheap disinfectant. A room meant for affairs and secrets. I sat in a chair in the dark corner, gun resting on my lap. On the bed, I placed a VHS tape, alone like an altar, and I waited. Minutes crawled like hours. Then, exactly on time, footsteps in the hallway. The door opened. Melissa walked in, dressed up, hair perfect, heels clicking. She scanned the empty room and froze when she saw the tape. She stopped breathing. And right then, my phone on a new SIM buzzed. A photo. My son and daughter sitting in a train compartment. Across from them, smiling, was a man who shot me in Evan's office. Below it, a message from an unknown number. Game change, accountant. Bring the documents, or your real family dies before your fake one. Melissa in the room was bait. The real trap had just sprung shut around my children. Our anniversary day. The phone in my hand felt heavier than the gun. The picture of the hitman smiling at my kids burned away every trace of anger, revenge, and righteous fury. All that remained was a hollow, ringing nothing. Melissa saw my expression. She took a step toward me, confusion turning into dread. She didn't know she was no longer the queen on the board. She was a pawn now, a bargaining chip. I showed her the phone. She stared, and I watched the light drain from her face. She knew the man. Her lips formed his name silently. Who is he? I asked. My voice sounded like someone else's, raw, scraped. She couldn't speak. She looked at the phone, then at me, eyes wide with something deeper than fear. Pure, ancient terror. She knew what she unleashed. I grabbed her wrist. Her bones felt fragile under my fingers. You're going to call him, your boss, and tell him I want to trade the documents for the kids. You're insane, she whispered. He'll kill all of them. And us. You don't know who you're dealing with. I picked up the VHS tape. Our wedding. Our beginning. Our end. 25 years, Melissa. My voice cracked like dry ice. 25 years you lied straight into my face. You think I have anything left to lose? I hurled the tape against the wall. It hit with a dull thud and dropped onto the dirty carpet. Call him. Her fingers trembled as she dialed the number she knew by heart. She spoke briefly, passing along my words. Her voice, the same voice that whispered love to me and whispered goodbye night to Evan, was now drenched in fear. She hung up. He said yes. The freight terminal off the ring road. 3 hours. We drove there in my car. Melissa sat curled into herself, silent. Rain drummed on the roof. The engine hummed a steady, anxious rhythm. On my GPS screen, a small that moved. The train carried my kids deeper into the unknown. Every mile they traveled toward something inside me. I drove on autopilot, eyes forward, mind blank. Everything narrowed down to one goal: bring them back alive. My mind was working sharp and cold like a computer. The accountant in me calculated outcomes, weighed risks, but the father in me was howling inside, helpless. I glanced at Melissa. She was staring out the window at the streaks of highway lights. Who was she now? The woman I once loved? Or the monster who calmly signed off on my death and put our kids in the crosshairs? Maybe she'd always been that person. Maybe I just refused to see it. I knew we couldn't handle this alone. I needed backup. I pulled off by a 24-hour gas station that smelled like gasoline and cheap hot dogs. "Stay in the car," I said. "If you run, I will find you." I stepped outside and called Eddie. He picked up on the first ring. "Eddie, I need help. They took the kids." Silence. Just for a second. "Where are you?" His voice was calm. I gave him the address of the freight terminal. "That's Victor's turf," he said. "Serious people. You go in alone, you don't walk out. I'll be there in an hour with friends. And Mike, don't do anything stupid. Your kids are worth more than alive as long as you got the files." He hung up. I got back in the car. Melissa looked at me with desperate hope. "Did you call the police?" I almost laughed. "I called people who solve problems," I said, "the kind who usually create them." We waited for Eddie at an abandoned gas station. Rusted pumps, shattered windows, a creaking sign swaying in the wind. Melissa was silent. She looked empty. All her polish, all that confidence, gone. Just a shell. "Why, Melissa?" I asked, not really expecting an answer. "The money wasn't enough," she whispered. She turned toward me. Tears glistened in her eyes. But I didn't trust them anymore. "You would have never let me go," she said quietly. "I would have let you go if you just left," I replied. "But you decided to erase me, like I was clutter." "It wasn't me. It was Victor. He said it would be easier this way. And you didn't argue. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict." Right then I realized that even if I saved the kids, whatever existed between us was beyond dead. Between us now wasn't just lies. It was blood. My blood. Eddie arrived in an old black SUV. 2 guys came with him. Hard, quiet men who carried themselves like they were used to walking into trouble and walking back out. Eddie stepped out, looked at Melissa, then at me. "So that's your Victor?" he asked, nodding toward her. "Her Victor," I corrected. He handed me a compact rifle, short, heavy, efficient. "Here, rules are simple," he said. "Kids first, then the files. If anything goes sideways, shoot at anything that moves, especially her." He nodded toward Melissa again. He was right. As long as she was with me, Victor needed me alive. I was ready. The rage inside me had burned out, leaving behind something else. Cold, solid resolve. I was going to get my kids back. At any cost. The freight terminal looked like a graveyard of steel dinosaurs, rusted cranes, mountains of shipping containers, pools of harsh light from lonely floodlights. We parked the SUV in the shadows. Up ahead, in the center of the lit yard, sat a black van. My phone buzzed. "Come alone with the documents. Leave your wife in the car." I showed Eddie the message. He nodded once. I stepped out, carrying a hard case in my hands. The wind pushed icy grit into my face as I walked toward the van. The side door slid open. I saw them, my son and daughter, their faces pale, eyes too wide. Beside them, that same hitman. And behind them, in the darkness of the van's interior, 2 eyes, cold, measuring, amused. Victor Cole. "Good evening, Michael," he said smoothly. "I've heard a lot about your accounting talents. Hand over the case, and you can take the kids." I stopped about 30 feet away. "Kids first," I said. "Then the case." Victor smiled and pulled out a phone. Dialed. In the silence of the terminal, I heard a ringtone behind me, from the SUV where Melissa sat. Victor lifted his phone to his mouth. "Melissa, darling, tell your husband to hand over the documents." He paused. "Or I'll have them kill your son first. Then your daughter. Last hour before sunrise. Perfect for goodbyes." His voice cut through the night like a knife. I stared at the van, at my children inside, and felt the ground slipping away. All my anger, all my careful planning, my cold, calculated rage, none of it mattered now. He'd outplayed me. He'd weaponized the only thing that truly mattered. And now he was using Melissa to push the blade in deeper. I heard the SUV door open behind me. I didn't turn. Her voice came through Victor's phone on speaker, echoing in the cold air, but she didn't say what he expected. "Don't do it, Mike," she screamed, her voice cracking. "Don't give it to him. He's going to kill us anyway." And then the world exploded. A blast of white light seared my eyes. Eddie's men flipped on their high beams and portable floodlights. The one-stem yard was hit with brutal, blinding light. Then the dry rattle of automatic fire. Bullets clanged off containers. I threw myself to the ground, arms over my head. The air filled with the acrid smell of gunpowder and burning metal. Around me, rounds whined and snapped through the air. I crawled behind the nearest container, heart slamming in my throat. Eddie's plan was working. Chaos was my only chance. I peeked out. Victor's men were firing from behind the van. I saw the hitman dragging my kids out, using them as human shields. In my head, like a warped overlay, I saw the old wedding tape, Melissa in her white dress, smiling, whispering, "Goodbye, night." All of it, every lie, every omission, every choice, had led us here, to this filthy concrete, under a sky full of gunfire. Rage came back, but it was different now, cold, surgical. I racked a rifle. Eddie and his guys were laying down suppressive fire, keeping Victor's men pinned. They were pros. They were carving a narrow path for me. I saw my target. The van. My kids. I'd popped open the case in my hands. Inside there were no documents, only neatly cut scrap paper and a small handmade smoke charge Eddie had slipped me at the last second. "In case everything goes to hell," he'd said. That time had arrived. I yanked the pin and threw the case toward the van. A second later, the yard disappeared into thick, choking smoke. Shouts, coughing, panicked yelling. Visibility dropped to zero. I ran straight into cloud, feeling my wounded shoulder scream, hearing nothing but my own heartbeat. In the haze, I slammed into someone, the hit man. He had my daughter by the arm. My son was struggling to break free. I swung the rifle and cracked him across the face. He staggered back, releasing my daughter's wrist. He was faster than I expected. His fist slammed into my gut, knocking the air out of my lungs. I folded over, gasping. He reached for a knife. But I had learned one thing from my life as an accountant. Always have a backup plan. I snapped my boot into his knee. Something gave way. He howled and dropped down. I didn't let him recover. I brought the rifle stock up and smashed it into his throat. He went down, choking. I grabbed my kids. "Run!" I shouted. "To that SUV, go! Go!" I shoved them toward the direction of Eddie's headlights. They ran, stumbling, coughing in the smoke, but they ran. My own small, brutal victory. The smoke began to thin. The van was riddled with holes, glass shattered, metal torn. 2 bodies on the ground beside it. But Victor wasn't one of them. I spotted him farther away, near a row of containers. He was dragging Melissa by the arm. She'd been hit, blood staining her pale coat. She didn't even fight. He shoved her into a black sedan that rolled out from behind the shadows. The car screeched and shot forward. I raised a rifle, but they were already too far. I might have hit him, or I might have hit her. I lowered the barrel. Eddie sprinted up beside me. "Kids are in the truck," he yelled. "We're leaving. Now." We piled into the SUV. My son and daughter threw themselves at me, sobbing. I held them close, breathing in the smell of their hair, their fear, their life. They were alive. We tore away from the terminal, leaving behind the smell of gunpowder and death. On the back seat, my kids finally passed out from exhaustion and shock. Eddie drove in silence. "What now?" he asked, eyes on the dark highway. "Now I finish it," I said. "He took her," Eddie said. "Why?" "She was your leverage." "She knows too much," I replied, "and he knows that." I watched the oncoming headlights blur past. For 25 years, I'd lived with a woman who turned out to be my enemy. She betrayed me, tried to have me killed, put our children in danger. And now her life depended on another monster, a man only I could stop or leave her with. What was justice? What was right? I didn't know. When we reached the safe apartment Eddie had arranged, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I answered. It was Victor. His voice was calm, but there was steel under it. "Bad move, accountant," he said. "You made me angry. The case was a decoy. The kids, they were just a warning." I said nothing. "You have 24 hours. All original files. Every single document. For your wife's life. Think hard. There's no second chance. Try to trick me again, and I'll make sure you watch what happens next." He hung up. I stood in the middle of the small, quiet apartment, listening to my kids, even breathing, as they slept in the next room. On the table lay my laptop, with every file, every account, every transaction. My arsenal. My revenge. My only currency. He had taken Melissa, my last bargaining chip, and my only living witness. 24 hours. Victor's ultimatum ticked in my head like a bomb. I looked at my kids. Their faces were peaceful, untouched by the nightmare we'd just crawled through. Saving Melissa, the woman who ordered my death, or handing over the files and trusting someone like Victor to keep his word. Hope was a luxury I could no longer afford. The accountant in me had already done the math. Any deal with Victor came out to the same number in the final column. Zero. Zero chance of survival. Zero chance of peace. I wasn't going to play by his rules. I was going to end the game. I picked up my phone and dialed a number. Not Victor's. "Evan," he answered with a shaky breath. "I've got one last job for you," I said. "After that, you're free." I sat at the table with the laptop in front of me. My arsenal. Eddie silently poured me strong tea. The hot liquid burned my throat. "What's the plan?" he asked. "The fire I started hasn't fully caught yet," I said. "We're going to add gasoline." I was going to dump everything I had. Not to Victor's rivals this time, but straight to the feds. Anonymous. Detailed instructions about where to look, who to question, which shells to crack. And to that same investigative outlet. With proof they'd try to have me killed. But not yet. Not tonight. "Tomorrow at noon," I said. "That's when it all goes out." "And at noon?" Eddie asked. "At noon, I'll be in Victor's office." I answered. "Evan will set up the meeting. All originals, in exchange for Melissa." Victor would think I'd broken, that I was crawling to him. He'd believe it. Men like him love the taste of victory more than money. Eddie nodded. He understood. This was all in. The trap would snap shut the moment Victor was sure he had me by the throat. The night passed in preparation. While the kids slept, I'd files, built packages, double-checked encryption. My fingers flew across the keyboard just like in the old days, back when the worst thing I had to worry about was a year-end audit. I found the digitized wedding audio, the quiet whisper I'd heard weeks ago. I saved it as a separate file. My private souvenir from a dead life. I checked the clock. A few hours to noon. I went to the kids' room, pulled the blanket over my son, kissed my daughter gently on the forehead. Their world had been shattered. I was the one who had to rebuild it from the pieces. I owed them that much if I ever want to call myself their father again. I slipped the old VHS tape into my jacket pocket, the one nobody needed anymore, the tape that started it all. It would end it, too. At exactly 11:45, I hit send. The emails went out to federal investigators, to journalists, to secure Dropbox. The mechanism was in motion now. There was no stopping it. I drove downtown alone. No gun. My weapon was information. I walked into the lobby of Victor's high-rise. Same smell of money and entitlement. Only today it didn't feel invincible. I rode the elevator up to the 42nd floor. His office door was open. He was waiting. Victor sat behind his desk like a king on a throne. Across from him, in the visitor's chair, sat Melissa. She looked terrible, pale, empty-eyed. A rough bandage wrapped around her arm. Victor smiled. I knew you'd make the right choice, Michael. Where are the files? They're already where they need to be, I said calmly. Right then, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and declined the call. It rang again, and again. Then a second phone started ringing, and a third. Annoyance turned into confusion. He finally answered one. What? He snapped. What search? What raid? I watched him as his empire began to crumble in real time. Far below us, I heard the faint sound of sirens, growing louder. Victor shot to his feet, rage distorting his face. He understood. He finally saw the whole board. He lunged at me, knocking the desk sideways. He was stronger, but I was ready. I slipped his first punch and drove mine into his solar plexus, just like Eddie taught me. He doubled over, choking for air. That's when a tactical team burst through the door. On the floor, hands where we can see them. They swarmed the room, weapons drawn. They threw Victor to the ground and cuffed him, knee in his back. Someone shoved me down, too, but I didn't resist. I lay on the thick carpet and, for the first time in a week, felt the tension finally start to drain from my body. This was the end. My own, carefully calculated victory. When they pulled me to my feet, I looked at Melissa. She sat motionless in the chair, staring at nothing. In her eyes, I saw no gratitude, no regret, just emptiness. Her world had collapsed too. Before they let me out, I walked over to the desk, took the old VHS tape from my pocket, and placed it in front of her. Something to remember your goodbye night by, I said. Then I walked out without looking back. 6 months later. We live in a small house by the ocean now. The sound of the waves has washed away the noise of city traffic in my head. I work as a financial consultant for a local firm. Quiet, steady work. The kids started at a new school. We take long walks. We talk about everything and nothing. We're learning how to live again. I read about Victor and his crew in the news. Long sentences. Very long. Melissa got 8 years for her part in it all. Evan got probation for turning everyone in, top to bottom. I closed the news tab. It didn't matter anymore. Yesterday, my son brought home his first A in math. My daughter signed up for an art club. Their laughter, that's my real bottom line. My real profit. My true victory. I stepped out onto the porch. The sun was sinking into the water. The air smelled like salt and peace. I'd found something better than revenge. I found peace. My family, my dignity. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new stories. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in his place? Saved the wife or left it her fate? Asterisk, asterisk.